Let's face it, testing is boring. With ERP systems, it's going to be even more challenging. Test-driven implementation allow you to automate the testing process and make it less boring. So that's what we are going to discuss in this video. Hello everyone. My name is Sam Gupta. I am principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. We help our clients when they are undertaking the digital transformation, starting from the strategy phase until they get the business results from their business transformation initiatives. Let's get back to today's topic, which is going to be top 10 reasons why your ERP implementation needs to be test driven in 2023. With ERP systems, even experts struggle with the test documentation as well as the coverage, and that's why you have the quality role as part of the software development team. With ERP systems, even though you might be able to provide the written test cases to your users, you can't expect them to write the test cases. It's going to be even harder for them to test the scenarios or capture the results in a very structured manner that is going to be consumable for the analytics that you are going to require to measure the coverage. So these are some of the issues, and that's why the test-driven implementation can help you in overcoming some of these limitations of the traditional implementation. So now let's look at the list. So number 10 reason on our list is the auto generation of test and test results. That makes the documentation easier. The challenge with ERP system is the cross-functional tests are going to be difficult to document with hundreds of inputs and prerequisites. And typically, it becomes very hard to track in where the documentation is going in terms of tracking how many different scenarios you have captured. So most likely you are going to miss some of those scenarios just because the whole model is going to be very chaotic as well as unmanageable. Okay, just because of the complexity that you have with these test cases. And that is the challenge that we have with the ERP test cases. So the automated testing framework or the platform allows generating the documentation automatically. So once you have captured these test cases as part of your test stub, then what you can do is you can generate the documentation automatically, and you can see, okay, what level of coverage has been captured so that you don't have to do this manually. And that is going to help you not only in terms of documenting, but thinking through the scenarios. You don't have to do the manual analytics because the platform itself is going to provide a lot of analytics in terms of what level of test cases have been captured. Or let's say if you simply want to tear out different scenario descriptions in terms of what has been captured or simply the ID to be able to analyze, all of that is possible using these test frameworks. And that's where the test-driven approach is going to help. And that is why your ERP implementation needs to be test-driven. So that's number 10. Now, number 9 on our list is be confident in rewiring the processes. Anytime you are going to refactor anything, especially with ERP systems, it's so tricky because each of the configuration, as minor as, let's say, if you are changing a simple class or the price or the cost, each of that is going to have implications at hundreds and hundreds of places. So let's say if you are able to check a couple of them, couple of places, you might feel that, you know what, I have done enough testing. But what is going to happen is this issue is going to pop up later on, and you don't even know when that might pop up. So sometimes it's very hard to predict, even for experts, where you are going to have downstream implications with ERP systems because of this nested business rule hierarchy with the ERP systems. So refactoring in general with ERP system is going to be a nightmare. And by the way, with these systems or the implementation, you may have tested everything yesterday, and now you need to refactor. And if you have to test everything again, that becomes a very boring process in general. So even if you are able to test manually, you might still miss some of the issues just because of the monotonous nature of the process. With test driven approach, the refactoring becomes easy because the test stub is already going to be written. The only thing you are going to be needing is you are simply going to be running that test stub, so you can be confident that whatever test cases that you had run yesterday, those test cases are working fine today as well, even after the configuration change. So that's a huge assurance in general, and you don't have to create these test cases. And let's say if you feel that some of those test cases may have been impacted because of your configuration change, you are going to incorporate those as part of your stub, so that that is going to be available all the time in the future for any sort of test exercises that you are going to be doing. So that's number 9. Now, number 8 on our list is going to be increased adoption because of fewer issues. Typically, the adoption issues are going to be if the system is not working as per users' expectations, or they are getting a lot more issues that they did not forecast. In this invisible nature of the ERP system, digital transformation systems, because there are going to be millions and millions of rules that are going to be nested together. So sometimes it's very hard to forecast these issues. But with the automated test stub, all of these test cases are going to be captured as part of these stubs, so you are not going to get as many issues, and you can pre-map these workflows as your users are going to be using the system, so they are going to feel that it's really tailored to their needs. Obviously, you still need to do the as is and to be workflows aligned with their needs, and those workflows are going to be the input for the test stub that you are going to be creating. So if you have modeled your as and to be workflows and modeled as part of your test stub, then for the most part, you are not going to get as many issues, and the users are going to be relatively happier. So that's number 8. Now, number 7 on our list is detect cybersecurity and SOX compliance issues. Typically, when you look at any of the digital transformation implementation, tracking permissions over the period of time becomes very tricky in general. The way the permissions are going to evolve is you are going to have executives asking for permission changes from all over the place. Sometimes you might be in a position to say no. Sometimes they are going to mandate that you need to change the permission. Now, if the IT team is going to be sophisticated with the way they should be managing the permission, then you might not get as many issues. But most of these startups are not going to have very seasoned CIO or the professional who understand ERP permission management deep in, deep out, to be able to understand these issues, to be able to model the security roles as well as the users. So the automated test stub, what it is going to do is it is going to detect your security issues on a daily basis. Also, when you are going to be testing for each of the users, sometimes you are simply doing the spot check. Okay, let's say if you have thousands and thousands of users, you might not be in a position to be able to log in with each of those users and test each of the workflow for each of the changes that you are going to do. That's a very expensive process in general, and nobody really does that as part of the implementation. But you might get the issues just because of these things, just because they are going to have the implications on the user workflows. If they are not going to have permission on a specific form, specific field, they are going to get stuck. Because of that, they might not be able to proceed, and they might impact the downstream workflows as well. So automated test stub can make it as easy as where you are going to incorporate all of your users as well as the permission set, the way they are configured in the ERP system, and it is going to test for each of those users in the automated fashion, so that you don't have to go through this exercise manually and waste your time. So that's number 7. Now, number 6 on our list is incorporate issues with the test framework as discovered. And typically, the issue lifecycle with most of the ERP digital transformation engagement is going to be you fix one issue that creates thousands of other issues. That's a very, very, very typical problem with these implementations, just because many hands are going to be touching the code base, the configuration base, and sometimes it's just harder to avoid these issues. So what the automated framework is going to do is anytime you are going to have an issue, first it is going to model it as a test case. So at least in the future, anytime you are going to be hitting the processes related to this particular task case, then that task case is going to execute and make sure that the task case is going to be successful even for any of the future changes. So when you do this exercise, you are going to be incorporating issues as you make changes, and that typically reduces the number of defects that you are going to get, and it is also going to make the testing far more fun in general because you are not seeing the same issues. It's not frustrating the users. So that's number 6. Now, number 5 on our list is avoid issues with environmental migrations. And typically, most of these issues in the cloud world, you don't really have vendors that have provided a very seamless migration between the environments. And even if they might claim that they have functionality built in to be able to migrate the data sets easily, but that is going to have a lot of limitations. They might be able to transfer the master data. They might not be able to transfer the transactional data. Also, you are not able to do this programmatically the way you may have done this in the on-prem setting. So typically in the on-prem setting, you had the access to the complete database and you designed the SQL scripts to perform this migration in the automated manner. So you didn't have as many issues overall with the environmental migration. But now with cloud, things are a little trickier because you will not be able to migrate as seamlessly in general. Now, the automated test stub, what it is going to do is with the environmental migration, sometimes you are not going to go through the 3 months of the testing again when you are simply migrating the data to another environment. And it's very hard to forecast the issues that you are going to get with the environmental migration. So the only thing you are going to do is you are simply going to be spot checking in the environment and simply going to pray that things are going to work in the next environment. The automated test stub, what it can do is once you have captured the test cases for one environment, you can use the same test stub in the next environment as well. The only thing you need to change is the parameters related to environment, and the test stub is going to run automatically. So you can avoid a lot of issues related to environmental migration. So that's number 5. Now, number 4 on our list is measure test coverage. With manual testing, it is going to be so hard to measure the manual test coverage just because your users may not be reporting the accurate data that you really need to ensure that the coverage is going to be there. Or you might not have the framework that will really work to ensure the test coverage. With the automated test stub, the test coverage is going to be part of the platform itself. The only thing you really need to do is you need to create a report that is going to provide the visibility in terms of what level of test coverage has been done. So it's as easy as that. That is never going to be there with your manual testing. So that's number 4. Now, number 3 on our list is the centralized coverage for the enterprise architecture. Now, even if you have done everything right from the ERP perspective, you might still get issues because of the integration, because of the master data misalignment between different systems or in different processes. So that's where if you have the centralized coverage of the test stub in the automated manner, then you are going to be far more confident on the state of the system. With the manual approach, it might be harder to create the centralized coverage. So the automated test can also help with the centralized coverage, and that's number 3. Number 2 on our list is avoid disruptions because of untested code. And this is a problem, especially with the companies that might be doing the ERP implementation for the first time. They might not appreciate the process. They might ask vendors to cut corners on the implementation. And one of the things that they are going to do is they are going to assume that I'm going to be spot checking on certain things and I'm going to hope that it is going to work. Now, that could be okay approach because obviously you need to follow the 80-20 rule in general. But sometimes, depending upon how much you have pressed these vendors, and they might simply leave the untested code because there is no way to find out whether the code was tested or not. You might ask them to, let's say, create a bunch of test cases, produce report. That increases the admin time overall. That increases the implementation cost as well. You might not be okay in paying more just for that documentation. So this is where if they are going to have untested code, the automated test stub is going to discover that whether you are doing this in the pre-implementation phase, post-implementation phase, it doesn't matter. Your test stub is going to grow with your implementation. As you discover more issues, you are going to incorporate that as part of your test stub. So it's going to be very rare that you are going to have a case where you have the untested code as part of your implementation. So that's number 2. Now, number 1 on our list is reduce the implementation time. And this is very interesting because if you look at the ERP implementation in general, the 70% of the time is typically spent just with testing. And the reason why you spend so much time in testing is because there are going to be repetitive test cases. Every time you make a change, you need to test a lot. Every time you are going to create an environment, you need to test a lot. And this is all manual. And when you are going to have multiple entities, you need to repeat the whole testing. In fact, if you ask any of the ERP vendors, they are going to quote the total cost for ERP similar for all of the entities, just because they don't really have the reusable synergies among those entities, because the majority of the time is really going to be in testing as well as training. And the other things that they are going to do, let's say they are going to say that I can save some money for you in the implementation as long as you are going to utilize the same configuration across the entities. And that is going to be, let's say, the chart of accounts, but your customer list is going to be different. Your configuration may be different for each of the entities. So their assumption is going to be, hey, you know what? I have already tested these chart of accounts for this particular entity. So most likely when I have this in the other entity, I'm probably not going to have as many issues. So I probably don't need to perform as much testing. So they are simply going to leave that. So that not only causes a lot of defects, but you are going to be investing a lot in the repetitive efforts as well as the testing. And this is where your automated test stub can help, because once you have created the test cases from the user perspective for one entity, the only changes that you need to make in the test stub is going to be related to this particular entity. If you have different URLs that you are using in the different environment, you can change that, some of the variables, but for the most part, the stub is going to be reusable for the other entities with some effort that is going to be required related to that particular entity. But in general, with automated test stub, you can save a lot of implementation time. So that's number 1. If you enjoyed this video, we are going to include the link of the detailed article, so you may want to check that. We also publish this video in the audio form on Spotify, Google, and Apple. So check there, and you might want to hit the subscribe button. We publish these videos on a weekly basis on YouTube, so hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Also, if you have not checked our digital transformation report for 2023, we are going to include the link in the description. On that note, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one.